Have you ever thought about what happens when someone's final wishes literally go on trial? We're diving into this incredible case today where a family's entire future, their whole inheritance, was hanging by a thread, all because of one single missing signature.
So think about it. One little mistake, a signature that's just not there. Is that enough to completely void a will? To just throw out everything someone wanted? You might think the answer is a simple yes or no, but trust me, it's way more complicated than that.
All right, so let's set the scene. Our story centers around a woman named Josefa Villacourt. Back on June 2nd, 1956, she did what many people do. She put together her last will and testament, laying out exactly what she wanted. But hidden inside that very important document was this one tiny little flaw, a flaw that would cause a huge legal battle. Okay, so take a look at the document itself. In court, they called it Exhibit A. It's 5 pages long. And Josefa, the testatrix, that's the legal term for the person making the will, she signed every single page. No problem there. And there were 3 witnesses who were supposed to sign every page too, and they almost did, but right there on page 3, one signature is just gone. The witness, a lawyer named Jose V. Natividad, his signature is nowhere to be found. Seems like a small thing, right? Well, it had massive consequences. You know, the rules for making a will are super strict. And there's a good reason for that. It's all about preventing fraud, right? You want to make sure the document is legit. And one of those strict rules is that everybody, the person making the will and all 3 witnesses, has to sign each and every page. And that's exactly where Josefa's will hit a major snag. On paper, it looked like it failed that crucial test. So this one little error, it basically split a family right down the middle. On one side, you've got the petitioner, Celso Icasiano. He's fighting to make sure the will is followed. But then, on the other side, you have the oppositors. And get this, it's Josefa's own kids, Natividad and Enrique Icasiano, who are arguing that the whole will should just be tossed out. And this is where the core of the fight really comes into focus. The petitioner is saying, hey, look, it was just an honest mistake. The witness who missed the signature, attorney Natividad, even said he thinks he might have accidentally flipped 2 pages at once when he was signing. Makes sense, right? But the kids, the oppositors, they weren't buying it. They claimed it wasn't just a mistake. They alleged there was undue influence, and even went so far as to say their own mother's signatures were fakes, forgeries. So now you've got this incredibly messy situation in court. You have handwriting experts for one side saying one thing, and experts for the other side saying the exact opposite. Plus, you have these really serious claims of fraud and forgery flying around. I mean, how is a court supposed to figure out what really happened on that day back in 1956? It seemed totally impossible. But then, just when it looked like the case was at a complete standstill, with no way forward, something completely unexpected happens. The petitioner comes forward with a new piece of evidence. And it's not just any evidence. It's something that would totally change the game. And what was it? A carbon copy. It turns out that when Josefa Villacorte made her will, she made 2 identical copies at the same time. This duplicate, which the court labeled Exhibit A1, was now presented as evidence. Now, this is the real bombshell. Remember Exhibit A, the original? It had that one missing signature on page 3. But this duplicate, Exhibit A-1, it was flawless. Perfect. Every single signature was there, on every single page, including page 3. This was huge. It was pretty powerful proof that the missing signature on the first copy was probably exactly what they said it was, just a simple human error. So now the Supreme Court has a really interesting puzzle on its hands. On the one hand, you've got a very strict rule written in the law. On the other, you've got what looks like a totally innocent mistake. So, what do? Let's break down how they thought this through. The whole decision really came down to this one powerful idea from the court. They basically said, look, why do we have these laws in the first place? To protect the wishes of the person making the will, the testatrix. It would make no sense to penalize her because a witness made a simple accidental slip-up. That would completely go against the whole point of the law. And this brings us to a really important legal idea called liberal construction. It sounds complicated, but it's pretty simple. It just means that sometimes a court can look past the super strict literal wording of a rule to focus on the spirit of the law, what it's really trying to achieve. And in this case, the spirit of the law was to make sure Josefa's final wishes were actually carried out. So the court's reasoning here was really smart, and it had a few different layers. Of course, the perfect duplicate copy was the biggest piece of the puzzle. But they also pointed out that the flawed page still had the official notary seal on it, which helped prove it was authentic. And then they made this genius point. Think about it. If the rules were too strict, what's to stop a witness from purposefully or even accidentally messing up a signature to sabotage a will they don't agree with? You can't let the whole thing be ruined by one person's muddling or bungling.
All right, so let's get to the bottom line. What was the final verdict, and what's the big legal lesson we learned from this case?
The court's final word was clear. They upheld the decision of the lower court. The will, both the original with the missing signature and the perfect duplicate, were officially accepted for probate. And that's the legal process that makes a will valid. So in the end, Josefa Villacorte's wishes were finally going to be honored.
So, what are the key things to remember from this whole story? Well, first off, it's about substance over form. The court cared more about what Josefea clearly wanted than about a small technical mistake. Second, an honest error doesn't have to be a fatal blow to a will, as long as everything else checks out. And finally, never underestimate the power of a perfect duplicate. It can be the key piece of evidence that saves the day.
And that kind of leaves us with a bigger question to think about, doesn't it? We have these really strict rules for a reason, to protect people and stop fraud. But this case really makes you wonder, when you're trying to achieve what's truly fair and just, how far should you be willing to bend those rules to honor the spirit of the law instead of just the letter?